Newsfirst, Newsline.
Good evening and welcome to tonight's edition of Newsline. I'm Sonali Wanigabadge, sitting in for Faraz Shaukat Ali. Our topic tonight focuses on the role and growth of SMEs in Sri Lanka. I'm so pleased to welcome to our studio our guest this evening, Tanya Abesundara. She functions as the president of the Ceylon United Business Alliance. Good evening and welcome to you.
Good evening, Sonali. Pleasure to be here.
Lovely to have you on board. Tanya, SMEs or small and medium enterprises have been acknowledged to be the backbone of Sri Lankan society and business. They are also some of the worst affected due to the multiple crises that we've had in Sri Lanka since 2019, as a result of which businesses have now got to struggle with crippling interest rates, the dollar crisis, raw material issues, the power crisis, and the impending electricity hike, among a host of other issues. How has this journey been for SMEs in Sri Lanka? You represent a large group of varied organizations which are SMEs. Speak to us about the current context according to your experience.
Yes, Sonali, thank you. It's a very interesting and a long question. If I were to break the question into different segments, talking about the SME. What is the SME? SME is the country's economical backbone. It's not only the underdeveloped world, but even in the developed world, the SMEs are the economy's backbone. So is in Sri Lanka as well, because we contribute 52% of the country's GDP. That's a huge amount of huge contribution. And but it is very sad to say, like every other countries in the world, we are not treated equally. We are not treated as important as we should be. Though we are the country's economical backbone, and we are given the stepmother treatment. For whatever the reason, the Sri Lankan policies are never made for SMEs. They are always thought of as secondary. I mean, they believe an economy to function, it's the multinational companies that should grow. It's never the case. I believe, Sonali, any world, any part of the world, the Western, the developed world, for them, most important is survival of the SMEs. Why can't we also have the same belief? Why should we also be given the same treatment? That is the biggest question we ask the government always.
Okay. You said stepmotherly treatment is being accorded to SMEs. Could you elaborate on this?
I mean, elaborating on the stepmotherly treatment is when the Easter bomb attack came forward. With that came the corona pandemic. Of course, the entire world was affected. So was Sri Lanka. But at the beginning, yes, they try to accommodate all businesses into a certain leverage and, give sort of breathing space. That was not for the SMEs that was par in par for all businesses, where the moratorium was extended and little things. And interests of the banking interest came down to a 1 digit, and those were very good policies taken at that time to keep the country's economic rotating. But with certain areas downfalls of the government central bank decisions taken, the previous central bank government decisions, along with the previous minister, the finance minister, suddenly, I mean, we were a country always kept the dollar under control. I mean, we used to keep the dollar into a certain control. So when we decided to let the dollar float about 8 months ago, and alongside opening up the black market was the worst thing that could have happened to the country. Along that, the floating dollar was taken over by the black market. The money laundering institutes. And we are people who are very much dependent on the foreign currency that comes into the country. We are not an industrial economy. We are a export economy to a certain extent, and we believe in the workforce money that comes into the country. Worker force, I mean, it's about 600 million rupees, the dollars that comes into the country. So our general budget is about, I think, 12 billion. Out of that, there is a certain amount that goes through the exports, and then the foreign funding, employment money that comes in. So that's how the country's economic, the dollar crisis. And then when this money stopped coming into the country, to the banking sector, because of the black market being opened, so every money that was coming into the country was kept in offshore accounts through these black market people, where they used to give something more than what the bank was offering. So the dollar never came into the banking sector. So we had a huge dollar crisis. Along with calling with the new central bank governor coming in and calling the country bankrupt. That was another huge blow we had. When a country is bankrupt, no other country in the world would want to help a bankrupt country. So we had no choice other to go into the IMF. So we are now trapped in a situation.
So Tanya, it is quite apparent that these short-sighted political decisions have landed us in this massive, irreversible almost crisis. But the government has attempted to make progress in terms of certain measures that it has taken, that it is taking in consultation with stakeholders. Do you see these consultations happening with respect to the SME sector?
No, Sonali, every decision that's been taken up to now from the government is always, I believe it is not a friendly decision towards the SMEs. It is always decisions to sustain the multinational companies. Now, there were certain restrictions put with HS codes. Now, suddenly with the huge dollar crisis, now I represent the government industry where we are 80% self-sufficient. This is one of the industries where nearly, I think, $2 billion is generated within the country's economy. That means $2 billion going out of the country, stopped. So that's a lot of money. So this industry was a self-sufficiently, hugely competitive, very standard industry. Now, I mean, made in Sri Lanka, everybody purchases. Even you and me and everybody. We don't look for foreign brands anymore to buy for our wardrobe. So now this industry was totally stripped off with the restrictions of the HS codes, where certain fabric was allowed, but all accessories was banned. So what happens to the garment industry? We are totally depending on raw materials to come out from offshores. We don't manufacture anything in this country enough to sustain our industry.
Sure.
So we only manufacture a very small amount of goods, even raw materials, accessories, anything.
Right.
So we need to bring these goods from outside. So when we don't have the capacity, dollar capacity to bring this into the country, what happens to the industry? So it is being not shut down, it is forcefully shut down. We are being brought to a situation. So what happens is, when we had a huge press conference, when we pointed out the mistakes to the government, they suddenly opened they let us bring raw materials and accessories. Then what happens is, SMEs are not geared rich in dollars. We are not geared for dollars, because we are 90% of the SMEs are local entities. So we don't have dollars. So we have to go into a banking institute to find dollars to open up LC. The bank didn't have money to give us. So if the bank does not, we have rupee, we don't have dollars. So what is going to happen? We can't bring down raw material. So it became a mafia. It was allowed to the big companies, multinational companies who had dollars to bring down. So then what happened was, the accessories to the fabric, everything was controlled by few entities, where it was priced at prices where it is not affordable for us.
Okay.
So obviously the consumer market, the prices went sky high. So in source of this, it's not only the garment industry, every industry in Sri Lanka was affected the same way, because SMEs are not dollar rich, they are only rupee. We believe we are a local entity.
Yeah.
So we were put to a situation where we were not allowed to breathe any longer.
So what's the present situation with regard to this aspect?
So the present situation is now, we are drowning. Why I call drowning, Sonali, with the new taxations and the moratorium being taken off, and the bank interest, what was from 1 digit to presidential, a 36 to 38% interest component. It is not heard of anywhere in the world, Sonali, because we are now, this central bank is implementing advanced economical policies. We are advanced economies in the world, but our economy is not an advanced economy. We are not geared for this sort of our economy. We are not geared for this sort of magnitude. We are a very small economy. We hardly have any reserves in our central bank, nothing at all. So when we have been put to a situation of this nature at a rate of 36 to 38% interest in a bank, how do you expect any business to sustain themselves? Because our liabilities are sky high. Our loans, with the moratorium, all the interest that was accumulated and converted to a new loan was given at new interest. And we used to run on TODs. Sometimes PODs and TODs. If it's a TOD, it is 38 to 40%.
Temporary overdraft.
Temporary overdraft. And SMEs are people who would take TODs to pay their salaries, and when they generally get their money back, it would be settled in a month's time. And
because it's a roll, right?
It's a rotating process, because we are not, our equity is not, we are not powerful enough. We don't have a lot of balances, but our businesses keep rotating and we sustain the economy. So we were pushed to a situation we could not breathe no longer. We are now suffocating. We are dying.
So Tanya, would you say that as one of the solutions you propose, SMEs need a tailor-made solution from banking institutions, for example, with respect to the loans already taken, with respect to settling of loans, and with respect to taking new loans and the interest rates? Yes. Would you say that would be a solution?
Yes. Mainly what we are asking the government right now is to, you have to cut down the interest rates. If you do not, it's not the companies you're talking, you're not the SME dying. The banking sector also would collapse, Sonali, because why I say is 60 to 70% of the lending through a banking sector is done to the SMEs. Of course, if you were to calculatively take, because we have more than 150,000 to 200,000 companies in the country, establishments. So these are all run through bank loans. There are no SMEs that run out of pure cash, other than the micro. So because SMEs are a sector where they host between 50 to 600 employers. So these companies are, most of the time, their collateral is their building, their property, their own home, what they are living. It's their collateral to the bank.
Sure.
So it's like they're sitting on a volcano. Anytime it erupts, they would be, burned.
Right.
So we are in a position where we need the government to be more humanely thinking. It's not only of themselves now. All these new taxations and everything is being implemented to sustain a government, not to sustain the SMEs. So if the SMEs collapse, the banking sector will collapse along with the government.
All right.
The country.
We are in conversation with Tanya Abesundara. We'll be back after this short commercial break. Stay with us.
News First, Newsline.
Local government election will go ahead as planned. Election Commission tells Supreme Court. Public Administration Secretary summoned by the Election Commission. Allegations made against government attempts to delay the election. Shortage of medicine takes its toll. Doctors and staff take to the streets. Fitch Ratings downgrades 10 Sri Lankan banks, CEB and Lakdanavi Limited. PUCSL calls for public views on electricity tariff hike. Remote Ambalavatta village gets a new bridge from Gammadda.
Newsfirst, Newsline.
Welcome back. You're with Newsline. We're in conversation with Tanya Abesundara. She functions as the president of the Ceylon United Business Alliance. Tanya, if we look at the National SME Policy Framework, it says that it stresses on the importance of creating SMEs that are globally competitive, dynamic, innovative, technologically driven, eco-friendly and sustainable. Do you believe that this, the qualities in this definition, the attributes in this definition have been fulfilled when it comes to Sri Lankan SMEs?
Sonali, I believe this is like a fairy tale. You know, when we are children, we tell our, when we were kids, we listen parents used to tell us lovely fairy tale stories. This is the category it should be. This is where the SME should be driven, and this should be the case of the SME. But to do so, the government has to make the necessary groundwork. They can set rules, regulations, and they can say this should be the case to be competitive. Yes, that is the case. But is the government doing their part for us to be into that position? Yes, for us to be globally competitive, the government has to look at us also in the way the government is looking at the BOI companies. Do we get anything tax benefits? Nothing at all. In fact, we are being squeezed and taxes are being put, taxes upon us, where to a position we are not competitive. For us, we have been loudly shouting out to say that the country to develop, it has to be an industrial economy, not an export economy and not an import economy. Every country in the world who are developed, it's an industrial economy. When I call it an industrial economy, Sonali, it is what we create within the country that does not have to be all things exported. We have to create an environment where we will have foreigners, business entities would come into the country and buy stuff, taking those into their countries in smaller volume. It is not always an export, but it is an export in another way, because what you buy, foreigners, so that business people will come into the country, we will have business zones, we will have business markets, like everywhere in the world. I mean, you take Bangkok to all these Asian countries, they have business markets, where everywhere in the world they come, they purchase things in little volume. They are not all exports. They are produced for the local and for the export, but they would purchase, and that creates a huge dollar coming into the country, and by that you will have the hotel industry will grow up, the tourist industry, then the food industry, everything is a chain store. So you have to look at things in a way where the country could go forward, not looking at one thing to say we only need big entities, we only need multinational companies to come in, we only need even creating a smaller thing into the world market to be competitive, where they want to come in and purchase, is an export.
In your opinion, what measures must be taken by the government to create an enabling environment for SMEs to sustain themselves?
Sonali, the biggest thing, the government needs to be transparent, and corruption should be eradicated. Transparency is number one for any government, any organization to go forward. Now, we as SMEs are being caught up in a web where we have nowhere to turn to, because there are no national policies. We don't know where to go to. There are policies being made, every government would come into power and have their own policies. But that would be changed by the next regime. So who are we going to turn to? What are we going to turn to? There are certain things If there is a national policy, it doesn't matter who comes into power, green, yellow, black, white. It's a policy that would prevail. So then the government, the country who is a business entity who wants to get into business, they know their pathway.
Sure.
So it is very easy, transparent.
Sri Lanka has continuously struggled with policy stability with successive governments, for sure. But what are the looking at this in a positive light? How can the government take enabling measures to rectify or do some damage control?
It's very easy, Sonali. I mean, at the moment, of course, the government needs to take few measures, business-friendly measures, what implementations they have to take. These are short-term policies. The interest components have to come down, taxes have to be revived and taken into consideration how a business can survive. And and the other thing is all these utility bills that has gone sky high, from electricity to fuel to everything is affecting the consumer market, because the market has got so thinned because of the inflation in the country. And due to the inflation, I always say the country is not still bankrupt, though the central bank called the country bankrupt. We are not a bankrupt country, Sonali. If we were a bankrupt country, you and I won't be sitting and talking here. Because still I believe we need national policies, policies that would be made by a government where we could go into a business knowingly anything is easy. Now any SME cannot go into a business with a project report. We want to start up a business, end of the day we have to have a immovable property for us to start up a business. We can have any project report made, but the bank will never give us funding. So the government needs to have a SME banking system where you identify the business and helping the business to go forward without collateral.
So then one of the issues that you identify is that banks are reluctant to give loans to SMEs, is it?
No, the banks would not give loans to SMEs without collateral.
Right.
So, there are other countries in the world, you don't need collateral to get a bank loan. If your business report and the project report that you have made and is feasible enough, the bank would provide the funding for you to start the business. But here, you can make any project report. End of the day, if a SME does not have collateral, they would not have funding. But that is not the case for multinational companies. The government would provide land, the government will provide the loan, where you bring in a foreign investor and you have tax relief for 20, 30 years. What does the SMEs have? We from day one have to pay taxes. We are squeezed and killed by the government who is expecting these policies. I mean, all these nonsense what the government has implemented, what you just now read. Where are the world policies?
In terms of multi-stakeholder consultations that need to be had to discuss issues and find solutions which are beneficial to SMEs, has that happened successfully thus far?
Nothing. I don't think any of the SME stakeholders are ever bought for any of these meetings. They would create different organizations to say that, we are having discussions to bring about new policies, policy-making teams. But we have urged the government, whenever you all are making policies, we should be included.
So are you saying that you don't have a seat at the table?
We don't have a seat at the table. Where we should be having, because we are the backbone of the economy. So any policy should be, they should discuss with the SMEs. We should be brought forward to a table, discuss to find out. These policies are being made with multinational company who does not have the ideology behind how to sustain the country's SME, because these are business people. Business people are not entrepreneurs. They do not create anything from nothing. Business people are different. They would take any company over and would have funding, and they would swallow another company. But we are entrepreneurs. We start something from nothing.
In terms of accountability, political accountability, and the need to get policymakers involved in these discussions, there are ministers and government departments established and set up and put in place to ensure that SMEs are and will continue to be the backbone of society?
Yeah, that is the biggest question mark. We put them there to support the country's economy, hoping they would be there for us. But it is very shameful to say we pay their salaries. They are being upheld by our taxes. Our taxes are being taken, they are being stolen to uphold the white elephant, so-called the government. What are they doing in return for the country? Absolutely nothing. They are enjoying luxurious lives. Their families enjoy the best of best. We put them in there for a 5-year job, hoping they would do something back to the country. Instead of they do things for themselves first. Tell me one entity who has come into a position, the parliament, the 225 people, how they start their political career, within the 5-year journey, how they become. Where does this money come from?
It's a great question for sure. Let's talk a bit about the quantity of SMEs that have had to shut down because of the current crisis.
Sonali, I think about 20% of the SMEs have shut down.
Right.
I think in the second quarter of this year, I believe the MPAs will go up to about 10 to 15%. That's about roughly, if you were to take about 1.2 trillion rupee in the banks will have to suffer. So that means that is the effectability of the SME. So if with the December season, the consumer market becoming so thin, the market value has dropped in about 40%. That's a lot. Of course, the turnover income has gone up. But though the turnover income has gone up, the consumer market has got so thin. If you have produced 100 pieces, only 40 pieces to 50 has got sold. Right. So the balance is there. So, but these have been invested for. So what is going to happen in another 3 to 4 months?
Okay.
So our liabilities stand there.
Tanya, the business community is a key stakeholder in resurrecting the economy from where it is now. We have to acknowledge the work that is tirelessly being done by various stakeholders such as the economists, the academia, professionals, etc., to ensure that somehow we see what's going on. Final minute of this show, I'd like to ask you, what steps must the government take?
To be very honest, Sonali, to answer this question, I need a lengthy time, but I'll try my level best to say what I'm going to say is very short. They are theoretically rich, not practically rich. For me, I believe they don't have any experience. Their theoretical experience does not count to be practical experience. They have to just imagine, we have 4.5 million workforce in this country. 1 million goes out of work. 1 million, forget about the rest. Each household that would earn a wage about 60 to 500,000 would be not there. So these people, how is the government expecting them to support them? Your policies are created for advanced economies. Our central bank is not geared to uphold these policies. Are we rich enough to give a dole like the Western countries if the companies collapses? You have to understand, when you are taking decisions, don't take decisions with your, I don't know, with your brain. You take decisions thinking it is implementable. You should be a bit humane as well to understand the policies. Just because you have a pen and a paper in front of you, you don't take stupid decisions like what the immediate central bank is doing.
All right. President of the Ceylon United Business Alliance, Tanya Abesundara, thanks so much for being a part of Newsline. Thank you for watching us. We'll see you again on Monday. Good night.